We'll call the meeting to order. Those willing and able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. We'll move on to number 3. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Randy, do I have a second?
Second.
Amy, any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion passes. Move on to 4, board action, start of the school year plan. Kevin?
School board members, you have before you our plan to return to school. I just want to take you through some of the highlights of it. As we've been saying since early back in July, the governor asked schools to put together 3 plans. One was for an in-person learning. The other was for a hybrid model where we would operate at 50% capacity in our buildings, and the third was for distance learning. We did have our distance learning from last spring. We have been working on a few tweaks with that, but for the most part, that's where that's at. In-person learning is something that we have prepared for. We have a lot of prescriptive procedures that are very similar to the hybrid model if we were to all be in session. The second model is the hybrid learning model, and what we are recommending, and when I say we, the administration team has been working on this, we're recommending that we move forward with a hybrid learning model for first quarter. So that would be through October 24th and starting on August 24th. So we would go for the first quarter in that model. Our current hybrid learning plan would be to have the kindergarten at Brown Elementary. We would move the first grade to Hill, and first and second grade would be there. And then the third and fourth would move to the middle school, high school, where we would have 3 through 5th would be going to school in the west wing of the learning area. They would go every day. K-5 would go every day. 6, 8, and 9, 12 would go every other day and have distance learning on their off day when they're not in school. We're calling this a blended model approach, and we feel that that is would be the most consistent way. We're looking at consistency for the first start of the school year, and that would be one where we're at. As we go into this a little bit more, I do want to just preface and say that the state, the Minnesota Department of Health and the Minnesota Department of Education have partnered to put together kind of a guide for us based on the number of cases, new cases we have in our county over the last 14 days. We were pretty high when that first came out. I should say pretty high. We were the highest number in the state of Minnesota with that model. I did speak with the Department of Health and our local county health, and they did say, in analyzing everything, that we could start with a hybrid model. So at a minimum, that's where we can go. So we really can't start up full with that. We were concerned that maybe they would only allow us to do the distance learning. At that point, we probably would have been here asking you tonight to push back the start of school, because we don't want to start with distance learning. We want to get our kids in. So that's where our recommendation and the rationale for that came in for that to do our hybrid model. As you go through, you can see that face masks, we had great discussions on face masks, and we're wondering how we were going to do that. The state, of course, has now mandated that masks be worn inside buildings. So masks are mandated, and so they will be for students. We do have shields for some of our younger learners and for some students who maybe won't do well with masks. So we do have that option, and we have some on hand, but most are on order yet. So we will that's something that we'll have to work out as we go along. Other things, food service, we'll be doing a lot of classroom, eating in classrooms, dividing out grade levels up here, the older, one grade level at a time, probably will be eating in the cafeteria. Another group will have one of the gyms set up to space that out. When we come in the morning, there will be definite procedures to try to keep people in groups and not have intermingling going on. So we will be organizing, and while we have those plans in place about how we come in and how we exit buildings. Transportation, we've got that worked out pretty well. I think Rudolph's have got the routes, and we've got people who are going to be transporting their kids so they don't ride the bus, but we feel that we can keep the 6-foot distancing on the buses. They also will have to wear face masks on the school buses. And then we've added a elementary counselor. We want to make sure that we monitor and get our, we're just going to have some conversations as we start the year, and we need to support our students and our staff as we go through the year, because this has been an experience, and how do we come back to school and try to have a normal school year when you're dealing with the things that we're dealing with and all the things that are going on in our world. So that's another piece that we've looked at for that. And then we got some required health practices, which you will see. We've got, COVID program coordinators, which is what is required by state, social distancing procedures, and signage in our schools. We have all of those things, I believe, in place. If kids get ill, how we will handle that, and the nurses, of course, the nurse will handle that. And then handling suspected cases, we've got how we handle those procedures in there. You will find on page 6 is where we have our elementary procedures for how we get to school, lockers, how we move to the specialist, and food service, and then if we have any suspicion of COVID or some isolation. And then Pipestone Middle School, high school procedures are there. These are overall guidelines. Mr. Strasser and Ms. Bartman do have detailed plans. They'll be working with their staff and also with families and students as we begin the school year. I do have, I don't know if anybody has any questions on anything at this point. I do have Ann Oren from Pipestone County Public Health here. We do have our administrators here, so if there are any questions on anything, I guess we can entertain some of those right now. Otherwise, I would maybe call on Ann Oren from Pipestone County to talk a little bit. One of the things that I've told you is that when we got that rating, the Minnesota Department of Health, I had to call them, and we had a Zoom meeting, and they talked through where our cases and what's going on in our county to come up with the determination that we could use the hybrid model. And I've also presented our plans to Ann at Pipestone County, and they feel good that and to the Department of Health, and they feel this is a reasonable plan, and we could safely start school with that. So
I do have a question, I
Yes.
guess. It says in the hybrid learning plan that we have room for, it's 50% capacity. Well, our 50% capacity, according to the last meeting, was 1,382 kids, which is greater than our enrollment in K through 12. So why are we unable to accommodate everybody?
the capacity,
Well, last meeting, half capacity at Brown was 135, Hill was 129, and the high school was 750.
that's half capacity,
Right.
right?
So that's 1,382 kids that we could accommodate at 50% capacity.
Right,
Or enrollment's only,
yeah.
what is
But
it,
Brown
1,200?
But Brown is, we can put kindergarten, we can't have, I mean, we could maybe do a couple of first grade classrooms, but that's where we start getting, when we split the first grade between that our specialists and those things become very difficult to coordinate. So it's
Right.
easier to have one grade level or two grade levels. We can't quite get all three grade levels at Hill. We can't get both grade levels at Brown. We can't get
Right.
all the grade levels here with all of that.
Well, unfortunately, easy is not
Yeah.
going to be the case here, no matter what we do, I feel like. And I just feel like the more kids that we have in school every day,
Yep.
the better off everyone will be, and the more fair it is for everyone's education.
Right. I don't disagree, but, you know, we have to try to keep things as safe as we can and have people spread out as well as we can. I know that, you know, 750 up here could be just the middle school, high school. That's pretty close to where we're at. But that, you also have to take into account, it isn't just the student numbers. You also have teachers, you know, support staff, custodial staff. So when you just look at those numbers and it's just students, yeah, but we also have, you know, 200 employees that also we have to take into consideration in those buildings. So that's, we could probably have squeezed everybody in, you know, and we could probably have calculated even, you know, some things, but I don't think that you take the square foot of your gym and the square foot of your auditorium and put that into complete learning spaces. We will utilize those areas for larger class sizes, but to say that we're going to put, you know, 60 kids in here because we can spread them out and have 2 classes going on at the same time, that's where I think the challenge came in with that. So it's, I understand what you're saying, and I know that there are some schools that are doing some of that stuff. You know, we'll see. I don't think the Department of Health looks upon that, you know, as truly trying to keep things spread out as best you can. So, but again, that's their schools, and they can do what they want.
My other question would be, have we thought about not offering preschool this year to adhere for more space, since we're not required to teach those kids? I know that preschool is very important, but it's also very important to have all of our kids in school.
Right. The preschool that we're leasing space from First Lutheran is really quite small. I don't know how many other classes we could fit over there. I know we have talked to Minnesota West about, and we are going to be able to get a little more space from them. So we, you know, there may be classes as we go through this. I look at this plan as having to be flexible and fluid, and as we see how things work as the year goes on, we might be able to do more classes, you know, in different ways. Some can come in a little bit more. I know some schools have talked about a hybrid model for 50% capacity. Well, what about a hybrid model for 75% capacity? Because we may, you know, if they did allow for in-person learning for all, we still could maybe move to something like that, you know, gradually as things go on and where things are at in our community, so.
And there isn't a classroom at Brown that's preschool?
We are looking to move one class up there? One class? The social distancing for the preschool at the church, yeah. You can use the microphone. Oh,
Sorry.
is that going to give feedback? Turn that off. Yeah, we didn't think that one through. It was a good try.
So yeah, we don't have a lot of, I keep pushing it. We don't have enough room down there, and they're smaller rooms. And so we thought we would move one of the preschool classes up just to accommodate that, so that they're not so squashed. Because if you've ever been down in the preschool at First Lutheran in the last couple of years, it's pretty tight down there, so.
Yeah, I understand the space. I'm just asking questions about the space we're taking up, is what I'm just asking.
And I think if it would have come down to, you know, make or break or something, we would not prioritize preschool over a first grade or something if we could have fit them both in there. But we just knew that we couldn't do both grades at Brown. So, but we do have enough space to bring up, you know, and that's 2 days a week or alternating days, and it's a couple hours at a time. So we felt we could utilize a little bit and free up a little space for the preschool that way. So, but if it would have been something, I don't think we would have prioritized preschool over any other grade level, that's for sure.
The part about facilities operating at 50%, is that set across the board by the state? That's their hybrid model?
The hybrid model is a 50% occupancy with as strict the social distancing as we can. It says strict social distancing, so we're trying to do everything we can to keep 6-foot spacing and those things. But I think there's also understanding that it's not going to be perfect, and, you know, we're not going to be jumping all over kids that, I mean, little ones especially, that'll be really hard for them. But we'll work on it as we go through the year, and hopefully.
And then the August 24th start date, has there been any discussion on delaying that at all?
Well, when the numbers first came out, we were at 70, and that said distance learning. At that point, I immediately talked to the chairman and said, we better call a special board meeting because we're not starting in distance learning. We said we don't want to do that. We can't do that. We have to get our kids in here. And if that's the way it has to be, then we would have recommended pushing back the starting date. But because we're able to do hybrid, and we feel hybrid is probably the best model to at least start the year and keep us with consistency. If we were able to start with everybody being here, I think that would have been hard because what happens if the numbers go up and we have to start shifting between these? We want to try to have as much consistency as possible through the school year, so that's why we chose that. But we did, if we would have been there, we would have definitely been bringing forth to the board to push back a start date so that we could get everybody in. But we feel now we're going to, and Corey and Tony can probably talk to what that first few days of school, we want to take some and gradually break and bring families and students in and kind of get into the school year with our open house. Maybe Corey and Tony, you guys want to explain how the first few days of school will go or what you're planning for that?
Yeah, we're looking at utilizing Monday and Tuesday, the 24th and 25th, as days where we can connect with students and parents in specific ways, meeting guidelines, bringing people in, talking to them about how we're going to carry out our programming, and getting all the things necessary to start the year. So we're going to utilize those 2 days with the goal of, on Wednesday, the 27th, having that our first day with students.
26th.
I'm sorry, 26th, with students, the K-8 as in person, and then on the Thursday with high school, 9-12 coming in person, and that would be the first distance learning day for 6-8. Any other details on that?
No, we would be doing the same thing. We're going to do scheduled meetings with our families, with each teacher, just explaining to them, what to expect, procedures, any questions they might have, hand out devices, help them with their kids to log in, just in case something would come up where we would have to do distance learning. And then also doing some sessions with our counselors and just talking about different things and what to expect, and as a community, what we can do to keep the virus down and that kind of thing, so.
And part of that is, most students in the middle school, grades 6, 7, and 8, know where their typical classroom is. We do need to move students to where their new room would be under the hybrid model on the high school side. So there is a little bit of a learning curve on that. So we will have scheduled meetings by homeroom for each homeroom and grade level during those 2 days.
Just trying to make it easier and more comfortable for parents with bringing their kids in and answering any questions that they might have.
So what do you foresee the distance learning looking like this year with the hybrid model? I mean, what are you expecting from the kids compared to the last 9 weeks that they had last spring?
Well, I think it'll be a different level because they will have that in-person element, so that is different. There'll be less disconnect. I'm not saying there won't be disconnect, because anytime kids aren't here, that's always a reality, and how do you keep them more engaged? So that'll be something that during kind of the in-service week next week that we work with teachers on. How do we teach when they're here? Because at the high school, using a block schedule where you have predominantly 90-minute classes, we need to learn how to utilize our time in that classroom, and then it's how do we carry that over for the next day. I get a lot of questions. Well, am I supposed to just do video for the whole next time? And I've talked about different scenarios. I'm like, well, maybe it can be some live options the next day with kids. Maybe it's a shorter video, and I look at it as what is essential for them to see of you that you want them on those distance learning days that they need, and not just, oh, here's a worksheet. Like that doesn't cut it. So there needs to be a little more continuity of learning, and I think there's a different level of engagement. And I would like to go back. We've been talking about leasing space at Minnesota West, and the agreement hasn't been finalized yet, but we are hoping to have some additional classrooms out there so that high school teachers could take advantage of using that space and bringing kids in on the distance learning days, so that we can find ways to use that space appropriately and with more kids. So there are some options on that end as well, and that's coming together.
How many people have you had elect distance learning? Have we had anybody elect just to do distance learning
I'm anticipating around 20 right now.
for the whole K through 12 or just high school?
512.
Okay.
I do see, I would anticipate that increasing probably closer to 30 to 35, I think is more realistic. But from our numbers from the survey and the sense I'm getting from conversations and what I hear, I could see that around 30 to 35. There's just a lot of unknown, even in a hybrid model for learning.
So those people that choose to elect that, are we holding them to that for the whole quarter then?
I believe that's pretty fluid. So if a student wants to come back in and do the in-person elements, we'll want them there. Because I think that, and I would encourage that over time as they get comfortable with how the structure of learning works, then I would welcome them in. I think our teachers would appreciate that too over time, because then they could have just a better connection with the student. So.
How many are there in elementary?
Right now, we have it was 24, 2 more signed up actually today, and I have a parent calling me tomorrow.
Okay.
We're going to talk, that might, and I don't know how many, she's new to town, so.
Our initial indication was about 75 in that survey, but we're more in that between 40 and 50 right now that are requesting it. I should, Mr. Strasser, we traditionally run a 7-period day. One of the things that we are planning to do with this is in the high school is a block schedule. Mr. Strasser, can you talk a little bit about that?
So in looking at the best way to prepare for the 3 models we were required to do, I kept coming back to how do we reduce movement during the day. And the 7-period day last spring was a challenge for a lot of students, and it was a challenge for a lot of teachers in the sense that it was a lot over the course of a day. And so I went in and I kept coming to the block, back to the block, because you have, typically a student will have 4 classes in a day for a quarter. And you get a little more depth because of the time that you spend on that class. But I think it opens up some opportunities for our teachers to explore how they can teach and learn and have a better continuity from an in-person to a hybrid, and and it should reduce the total number of students that they work with on a typical day, which I felt was very important. You go from trying to track 125 kids in a geometry to now tracking right around 80, maybe 85 kids. That's a big difference. And so I think we can spend a little more attention to our students because we're not maxed out with the number of students we typically would see in a day. So I thought that was very important. The block, the way I was able to structure it throughout the day also allowed us to split the high school lunchtime. So I can stagger when we go and eat lunch, and that helps with just overall spacing and our movement distancing during the day. So I thought there were more positives to doing that. There are some distinct struggles because you go from 14 credits max to 16 credits to be earned in a year. So we'll have to make some adjustments in our policies on that as we go forward. And I know filling schedules will be a bit of a challenge as we are still working through that. But I think in the long run, knowing what we know right now, that this was the best option for us. And hopefully it's just a year kind of deal. So that's how I got to the block.
And for distance learning, because of the blended model that we'll be using in high school and middle school, it's pretty conducive to the distance learning for those, so they will be able to take the classes that our teachers offer, and they just won't come in on those off days, but they should still be able to keep up with what's going on in the class. On the elementary side, Ms. Bartman, maybe you want to talk about how we're going to do distance learning in the elementary?
Yep, right now we have one teacher who is willing to do our distance learning for our students, and so she'll have a class K through 4 of those 26 kids. So.
That way we're not having every teacher in the elementary. They
Right.
can focus on the students that are there, and we'll have one teacher who will focus on the students who
distance
just are
learning.
doing distance
Yep.
learning. We felt that was just made sense and the least burden on our staff, and the most probably giving the better attention to those on distance learning. Someone will be specifically focused on them. So that's our plan for the elementary distance learning.
And I will add at because of the way the block kind of structures and the staffing that it takes, I was able to shift a little bit and get to 4 sections in the middle level. So those teachers benefit by teaching 4 sections of 8th grade math, 7th grade social studies, and so they have reduced preps and reduced number of students over the course of the day. So the majority of our middle school teachers will have 80 to 83 students to focus on during the day as well, even though the schedule they work on is, we call it a modified 7 period day because of the intervention and prime time that we built into it. And we still intend to use that in unique ways to meet individual learning needs. But that's, I thought that was a positive with the whole schedule and how it came together in utilizing staff and trying to space things out so that we can benefit kids on a hybrid model.
So what would happen if we get under 10% and we can come back full-time? Can we do that at any time? Or are we going to stick with the hybrid till October?
Well, we can. I mean, that's a choice. I think we're asking to stay with the hybrid for first quarter and then make a decision. And if we want to be more fluid after that, but we just want to have some consistency to start the school year. And, we talked about, should we look at October 1st or what, should we go to MEA? And then it was just like, well, let's just do the first quarter this way. And then at that time, we'll be able to evaluate and see what we want to do. Maybe we say we want to stick with it through Thanksgiving, or the numbers have settled down and everything looks good and everything's going really well. Let's start in-person learning starting second quarter. but we do need to be prepared because if you look on page 12, it shows the learning model parameters. So at the 0 to 9, you can be in-person learning. If you go to 10 to 19, you do in-person learning with your elementary, but hybrid with your secondary. 20 to 29 is hybrid for all, and then 30 to 49 is hybrid for elementary and distance learning only for secondary. The way we've structured it, our K-5 can go to school through all those first 4 phases. So the K-5 will have consistency and be able to stay in that. That's nice. But if you do go to in-person learning and something happens, then you're going to end up moving your secondary. And if you keep going, then we have to move people around to different buildings again to get to the hybrid model.
So if we go over 50, do we have to totally go distance learning
Well,
next week if that would happen? Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, Ann, this is where we were at, and I got to speak with Susan Clammer from the Department of Health and the wonderful Ann Oren from Pipestone County Health and Human Services, and they know where cases are, and they felt that we could safely go with hybrid.
Okay.
But if they said, you have to go distance learning, then we have to go distance learning. They could even, our number could be 25 and something happens in our community and they say, we better shut down here. If we get cases in our school, if we get, different types of things, that's who I'll be speaking with about where we're at. So,
do they just look at a number or do we take into account acuity and things like that?
Very good question. Can you hear me?
It's kind of echoing.
Can you hear me now?
if you talk louder.
Okay. So the numbers are just a start. That's just a place for us to start. What I can do, because I have access to all the information of everybody that's testing positive, so I can take a look at those numbers and kind of put them into context. I can look at age ranges. I can look at, because it's a Pipestone County, if, let's just say, Edgerton had a large outbreak, but there wasn't hardly anything in Pipestone, I could take a look at those, and we could help, between us and the state MDH and Mr. Enerson, we can take a look at those to help decide what the best options would be. When the Pipestone County numbers were up in the 70s, there was a older population of positive cases, and so I think that's why Susan Clammer was okay with you going to starting out with a hybrid to begin with. But now, since that, the numbers are still kind of high in Pipestone County, but what we're seeing is much more community spread. So I've kind of looked at the age ranges, and the age ranges are all across the board. It's not just a 60 and over population anymore. So I think this plan as a hybrid is a really good model to start at. I kind of like to think of it as a sustainability plan. It's not just about what school looks like on day one. It's about how do we not just start on day one, but keep our kids in school, even at a hybrid model, is better than distance learning. And I really feel like this is the best way to do that, to make sure you can at least keep most of your kids in school every day. I can certainly answer other questions too, does that help?
Well, I'm bouncing here a little bit, but in our plan also, they talk about the regional support teams. So, and they're not quite yet in action, but when we get into school and when we do our analysis of these things, that's who we're going to be working with. And if things, they have, we have, if 5% of your student population is ill, we may need to be looking at things. If there's a positive case in a classroom, they're going and they will be helping us as a school. So this is not going to just be on me and the principals and our school nurse. They are there to partner with us and take us through these types of situations so that we keep everybody safe as possible in our schools. And if that means, you know, if they say, Kevin, it just isn't safe for you to be in session, then we may have to move to distance learning in some way, shape, or form. So the levels are there kind of as a starting point guide, but they're not absolute. We can have that conversation, and even if the numbers are lower, we may have something specific in ninth grade that we may need to take a look at, or something specific in a you know, a building. So we will then have to make that decision of what we do with those things. Does that make sense? So I've said, I feel 100 times better knowing that we have somebody in the health area to support us and stand alongside us as schools. And the Department of Education and the Department of Health have worked together to have these regional support teams. They have them all throughout the state, and we will have one specifically for this area down here. So does that sum it up pretty good, Ann?
Yep, and we've been doing this ever since this pandemic started. We've been working with large businesses and all kinds of different, we've been working with law enforcement and all kinds of partners across all of our 6 counties, trying to do the exact same thing. It's just a little bit different level when you're working with schools, because it's a community effort. The other thing that I would like to mention is I think it's important to note that what happens in the community will impact what school looks like, and what happens in the school will impact what it looks like in our communities. So this really is a joint effort with the community. The school needs the community's help to reduce the spread so you can stay in school, because it's the community data that we're looking at.
I have a question. Could you speak a little bit more about what would happen or what will happen if a teacher or a student in an individual classroom tests positive and what that process looks like?
Sure. We will work with the school on doing the contact tracing, so identify who those close contacts are in the school. That's why we're really pushing for cohorting or podding kids, so that there's a reduced number of people that they have close contact with every day. So a close contact is identified as somebody who's been within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. If a student or a teacher tests positive, we will help the school identify who those close contacts are, and close contacts will need to quarantine for 14 days. And then the student or whoever tests positive will need to follow the recommendations based on symptoms, which is at least 10 days, and they have to be fever-free. That it's changed from 72 to 48 or to 24 hours, and the reduction of symptoms. So that's kind of been similar. So once school starts, we're not just going to look at the data from the community, but we're also going to pair that with the data from the school. So how many kids do you have out in isolation and quarantine? Is it just one class? Is it several classes? Is it a team? What other kind of community impacts do we have? And that will help us determine if we need to move up or down models.
But I guess, so what you're saying is because of the masking, the universal masking within the school and the efforts to social distance, it doesn't necessarily mean that if someone's positive, the whole class will have to home isolate if someone's positive. Not necessarily.
Likely that would be the case, because it's, especially with the littles, it's going to be very difficult to keep, as much as we want to keep everybody 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. Likely a cohorted class would have to quarantine for 14 days. We have had cases where coaches did a really good, like for summer programming, sports programming, we had a coach in the area, in our 6-county area, that tested positive, but they did such a great job. Everybody used their own equipment. The kids were all 6 feet apart. Nobody else had to quarantine except for another coach. So that's why we're really pushing for this type of podding the kids, I guess.
So So then I guess as a school district, what is our plan, especially with those K through 5 or even K through 3, but where it's going to be very difficult to social distance because of just how young they are? If it's 2 weeks at a time, 2 weeks at a time, if that's happening routinely, then how are we going to maintain reading and writing and learning how to read and all those fundamentals that we know need to be implemented at a very early age?
I think that's part of, we hope that that doesn't happen, but if it does, we will have to deal with it, and there will be distance learning. We still will work on doing that, but it won't be in person, but it will be distance learning, and we'll have to try to maintain as best we can. The nice thing is they are not permanent. I mean, it's 14 days or 2 or 3 weeks, and then we can come back together, not like last spring where we were out for 14 weeks, or it was a long 50 days, the end of our school year. So that's where we would move, and hopefully that's again where, if we follow the plan, if people do their due diligence, hopefully we can be consistent and stay in school and not have that. But if we're gonna, if someone's his kid is sick and they send him to school, and that's where we're gonna have to follow these protocols, and people just have to understand this is about everybody in our community. Ann said it right. It's that's what it's gonna take. So.
And Amy, if I could add, that's why we're sending devices home every day with our K through 5 students. So if there is the event that they have to shift to distance learning because they have to be quarantined for 14 days, it can happen seamlessly. And those teachers, can slide right into what they had planned for the next day, right on their digital learning platforms.
Great, thank you.
And I foresee, you guys will weekly give us updates on where we're at number-wise, and
This is a weekly and even daily, depends upon what's going on in our community. I've also, I believe, Ann, if there's something going on, they're going to let us know, and they're not going to wait till Thursday.
Yeah.
Because when people get tested, they have to identify, what school district they're from, and do they have children, and where do they go to school. And so we're going to know, well, I won't, but the public health will know, and they'll be our partner through this and kind of be watching out for us and letting us know if things are going on. So again,
On the handout that I gave you, with a blue graph on the front and the colorful thing on the back, actually that 19.6 number is likely, it'll be close to the number that comes out on Thursday. I ran the numbers yesterday. But also I did run the numbers up to current, and I think you're already over the 20 for this week. So that number is kind of riding the 19.6. I think it's going to be a little bit higher for the next week. Keep in mind that number is, it's not the same number that you see that comes onto the website, the MDH website of cases that we see every day. It'll be a little bit different because the data that they're using is the date of specimen, which I think is a more accurate number because it's the date that somebody actually tested positive. The problem that we have with that is there's a slight delay because sometimes it takes up to a week to get those results. And so if somebody gets tested on the 1st, they may not get their results until the 6th, and then on the 6th or the 7th is when they come out on the MDH website. That's when we'll see that. So there is a little bit of a delay, but it's a more accurate number than the date that it gets out on the website.
and that number represents the whole county, correct?
It does.
So that's where we're able to get by with the in-person hybrid model, because our particular area then is low enough.
I think your model is truly the hybrid model. The nice thing is you have enough space to have your K through 5 in person. So it really is a hybrid model. It's just that it's almost semantics at that point, because you have a hybrid model because you can socially distance your K through 5 in
Yep.
the building.
Yep. Okay. Any further questions?
Can you do the rapid testing on the kids if we do have an outbreak? How long is a rapid testing? I don't know. 1 day, 4 hours, a week?
It's a good question. I don't believe that our healthcare systems are using the rapid test. I don't think that the supplies are readily available and they're saving, I think they utilize those supplies for emergency surgical procedures. If somebody needs an emergency surgery, they have to have a COVID test before they can go in.
Right.
So I think they utilize those tests for those circumstances, so I don't think they would be available to us. Now, if if that supply went up, then it may become, testing supplies since March has been up and down, as we've seen with the recommendations on who's getting tested has changed quite a bit even since March, so.
Okay.
I know that the teachers have moved up into a tier 1, so they will get priority testing, a teacher can. I don't know if they'll do that for all students, but if a teacher feels that they need to have a test, they can go in and should get the results back within 24 hours, I believe. They're a tier 1.
I believe that is the case for a student as well.
Oh, they are? Okay.
I think we got a health advisory that included students on that, so that's good.
So if there's a positive in a classroom or a group of students, is everyone required to test, or they're just required to isolate?
Nobody is required to test.
Okay.
If there was close enough contact that there might be a recommendation of testing, and the recommendation of testing is not to go get tested right away. The recommended time, the best time to get tested is between 5 and 7 days after being exposed, because your body has to build up the viral load. If you get tested on day 2 or 3, likely you'll test negative, but in 2 or 3 days you could test positive. So even if you have a negative test, it's still a 14-day requirement for quarantining.
14 days from the test or 14 days from?
From your last date of exposure.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions?
I just, we talked a lot about, some changes with how we're going to be teaching in middle school, high school, and also being prepared for hybrid. Ms. Wellnitz, we have a plan also for staff development to help our teachers with some of those things. So next week, our in-service will look a little bit different and be focused primarily on these items. I don't know if you want to just take them quickly through what we're planning for next week.
Our PD next week is solidly time in the morning for professional development. Our staff each, we've broken them into middle school, high school, elementary, and sometimes it's just middle school and high school, so that we're in small enough groups that we can use this area or the commons so that we can social distance. All of our PD will take place in the morning, so that staff have every afternoon to devote to planning. It usually takes about 3 years to transition into a block schedule from a 7-period day. So our staff are going to need to focus on prioritizing their standards to teach in that block. They are going to also need to, as Mr. Strasser alluded to, need to learn what's most important to do when the students are in front of you versus when they are distance learning from you. So those are a few of the sessions that we will have that I will present. Mr. Strasser's been helpful, as the two of us have taught on block schedules before and have gone from a 7-period day to a block, so we understand what needs to happen. I've also talked with some of our staff who have taught in block schedule in previous districts and asked them for their best advice for their fellow staff members. We are having our counseling staff train all of our staff on trauma-informed instruction, because it's going to be a different world with our students. And how we react as adults to students and their behaviors right now needs to be very different than we would in a normal situation. So trauma-informed practices, hybrid learning or blended learning, block schedule planning for the elementary. They have a couple other things going on. We purchased Seesaw, so it's not the free version, it's the real version, so there's a lot more bells and whistles that they'll get trained on how to use it. But they have each, Mr. Strasser and Ms. Bartman also have time to meet with each section of students. Ms. Bartman has a meeting with each grade level. Mr. Strasser has a middle school meeting, has a high school meeting at the beginning of the week, and then at the end of the week, they will both come back to them and see where they're at on Thursday. You know, what else do you need? And get us ready to send off on to that first day of school.
Okay. Anybody else? Well, I would just like to say, Brad and I talked before I came to the meeting, and his main concern is that, you know, in-person learning as much as possible. You know, he agrees with, too, Katie, that we do not start distance learning right away, which we know that is not the plan. We know the plan is hybrid model, so Brad just wanted everybody to know that that's where he sat as far as hybrid model. So,
And again, you know, I think we talked about it earlier. If we would not have been able to do something in person, that we would be asking to push back the start date.
yeah.
I don't know what we would gain now by pushing it back. I think we want to get going, and I think we have a good plan. We know that not everything's going to be perfect, and then on top of everything, we've got a construction project going on, and so traffic flows are going to be messed up, and rooms are, I mean, Cal's crew is really having fun right now, thinking they're going to get the place clean, but we're doing our best to do things. I would also add, too, that we are moving some furniture. First grade, the classroom furniture at Hill, we're going to move first grade furniture over to Hill, and we're going to move the third grade furniture up here. I think the fourth grade can fit in what we've got. So we are doing some moving of some classroom furniture that we'll have to go back if we move back into a different model. So, but we are doing some of that work right now too. We just feel that's prudent and best for those students and classrooms.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
I don't have a question, but I think I just want to make sure that we recognize that the teachers, administration, custodians, food service, every part of the school district here has put in a tremendous amount of work to make sure that we're getting our students the best possible education they can. And I don't want to lose sight of that. And I just want to make sure everyone knows that we appreciate that as a board. And if we just continue to work together, I think we can get through this, and there'll be some positives out of a negative. So thanks again.
Okay. So then, do I have a motion to start the school year plan with a hybrid model?
So moved.
Lance, do I have a second?
Second.
Randy? Any further discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the start of the school year under the hybrid model plan signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Katie, was that you? Mm-hmm. Okay. Motion passes. Move on to 4.2, Memorandum of Understanding for Extracurricular Duties.
We have two MOUs on here with the teachers union. The first is on extracurricular duties. If seasons get canceled, we wanted to know how we were going to handle the compensation of coaches, and if they're going to be partial, or how we wanted to do that. So the negotiation committee did meet with the teachers union. We have this language, and the teachers union has passed this through their membership. So now it comes down to the board to agree to this MOU. Basically, it does provide some compensation to a coach if a season is canceled, because we recognize that they do things outside of this season. Plus, they also make connections with students. If we do have the seasons, and if they're maybe shortened, we still will compensate them at 100% of the agreement. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where things are at with that MOU. And I would recommend approval.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding for extracurricular duties?
So moved.
Amy, do I have a second? Katie? All those in favor of approving the memorandum of understanding for extracurricular duties signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. 4.3, memorandum of understanding for flexible scheduling with teachers.
This MOU basically is in regards to the block schedule. That is not in our contract, but we felt that due to the emergency, state of emergency and having school, that we just wanted to have some language and say this is not a normal year. We took, I mean, this is not going to be a normal year, and so with that, we may have to do some scheduling. It also covers if we go into distance learning, and we have one teacher doing distance learning, so we just thought having that in there would be something that just kind of gives us and that flexibility, and it just takes away some, if people are doing different duties and those types of things. Also, the teachers have passed this MOU, so now it's to the board for it to become in the contract for the remainder of this year.
Any further questions? Any further questions? Now, if I'm correct, this is only on there through the end of this contract.
June 30th,
Yep.
2021 is,
Yep.
it would need to be renewed if
Yep.
this continues, so they just expire at the end. Sorry, Deb, they need, it expires at the end of this school year.
Yep. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding for flexible scheduling with teachers?
So moved.
Marcy?
Second.
Lance? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the memorandum of understanding for flexible scheduling with teachers signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion passes. 4.4 and 4.5, school counselor and long-term teacher sub.
Normally, these are under consent agenda items, but we just had two recent hires, so we thought we'd get that taken care of here too. So I recommend you approve the hiring of those positions.
Any further questions? Any further questions? Do I have a motion to approve 4.4 and 4.5?
So move.
Randy, do I have a second?
Second.
Amy? Any further discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Yes, Deb.
Let's see, 808.
There was, MSBA has a model policy on face masks. It's also a requirement, and we just say they're required. It does have some stuff on there, but we can wait till the regular meeting if we want to review that. We didn't get to that tonight, so
Just put it in with the policies at the next board meeting.
we can do that.
Okay.
Masks are required, and
Yep.
there's all kinds of guidance on that, so just for the board and for everyone, I mean, someone who doesn't believe in wearing a mask, or I'm not here to judge anybody's opinions on the matter, but it is the rule, and so you need to wear them when you're in here. And if you feel strongly that you don't want to wear one, then a student can have distance learning. If you have medical conditions that don't allow you to wear a mask, I'd have to ask, why do you? Probably not the best place to be if you have medical conditions that you can't breathe through a mask. So we'll deal with those on an individual basis. But that policy kind of lays out all kinds of things, and we're not looking to punish and get after people for this stuff. It's just the rule, and we need to follow through on it, so that was where that was at.
Okay. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Katie, do I have a second?
Second.
Amy? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion passes.
All right.